Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Incubator. We have a special episode for you today. We are having a big team around the table today. So, Daphna, do you want to introduce our participants?
Well, I sure do. I'm really excited. This is something we've been talking about wanting to do. And we're really pleased to be able to be talking about the Neoheart conference.
That's right.
I know it's something I wanted to attend, but haven't been able to make it happen. But I'm feeling like after people hear this podcast that they will be wanting to sign up. So today we have on Dr. Rudy Toms, who we've had on the show before, and Dr. Amir Ashrafi. So we are so excited to have them both on today.
Yeah, this is very exciting. Amir, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, Ben and Daphna.
And Rooney, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
You're
guys.
becoming a feature of the show. You might become the consistent host at this point.
We'll see. Yes.
So we're very excited to be able to bring to the community information about some of the conferences that are happening in and around the field of neonatology. And we wanted to do something special with Neoheart because there's a lot of topics related to PDA, hemodynamics that everybody is talking about. And we thought that Neoheart sometimes could be perceived because of its name as like a cardiologist only conference, but it really isn't. And it's something that could be very, very relevant to our community. So Amir, can you tell us a little bit about Neoheart and what is the goal of the conference in a few words?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. It's funny, when I talk to the neonatal community, they say, I think it's geared way too much towards the heart. When I talk to the cardiology community, they say it's geared way too much towards the neonatologist. So neither side is totally happy that we probably struck in the right balance. So Neoheart is exactly what it sounds. It's this amalgamation between the neonatal community and the cardiology community. Much like Rooney, I trained on both sides, so I've seen both sides. And neonatologists love to criticize the CVICU. The CVICU loves to criticize neonatology. And this is just one of those, brothers,
the fellows get stuck right in between, right?
What's that?
The fellows get stuck right in between.
And the fellows get stuck in between.
That's right.
And in all honesty, as much as we joke about it, I think both sides have legitimacy to it. If if you were to manage a typical neonate the way the CVICU does, of course it would be catastrophic, and vice versa. If you manage a single ventricle restrictive atrial septum the way most neonatals micropremie management is, of course that would be catastrophic as well. So I think both sides have some legitimacy, but on the other side of things, there's a lot that should and could be learned from one another. There are certain things that we do very well, and of course vice versa. And there's a lot of things that overlap that I don't think people fully appreciate. Managing diaphragmatic hernia is much closer to managing Schoen's complex than it is to managing anything else in 24 weeker. There's just so many more similarities in those two. Managing a kid who's actively being cooled is not too much different than managing a kid that's just coming straight off a bypass who's hypothermic for reasons of chronic arrhythmias or something to that effect. There's just a lot more similarities that we don't fully appreciate. So bringing the two worlds together was really the goal of the meeting.
And so for the people who haven't checked out the website, so the conference will take place this year between August 3rd and August 6th, correct?
That is correct. August 3 through 6 in Disneyland, California.
I love that you say Disneyland. I mean, you could have said Anaheim, but Disneyland makes it sound so much more appealing.
It's actually the first time we've done Disneyland. They've tried to lure us multiple times, and I was personally the one that pushed back and said, "No, let's do a beach location." So it's always been in Huntington Beach or San Diego, right on the water. Every time from the conference, you walk out, the ocean's been right in front of you. This time we figured it's COVID, it's the summer, people are going to want to spend time with their families. Disneyland is a good time to do Disneyland. Let people bring their families. Tthat's
a great idea.
And you were talking about the website. I'm embarrassed that I don't know this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's www.chalk.org/Neoheart. chalk.org/Neoheart. I think that's the website.
And you have a web.cvent.com page for the conference, which we will link in the description. I wanted to touch base a little bit with you about you were mentioning how you are hoping that Neoheart could be this place where everybody comes together. And I think you guys are doing that very, very well, because it incorporates a lot of different, I guess, I want to say like societies. Like you have the Newborn Brain Society, you have the Pacific Coast Fetal Cardiology Group, you have the Next Society, and then you have, I guess, PDA, the PDA Symposium is incorporated into the Neoheart conference now. So can you tell us a little bit about all these different, this massive collaboration between all these entities?
Great question, Ben. If I had to summarize Neoheart into one line, and we've said this, I can't tell you how many times, thousands of times we've said this amongst each other, break down silos. That's pretty much, if I had to narrow it down to one sentence, break down silos. Originally, it was just neonatal community versus cardiac community. Then it started to expand to neonatal, cardiac, anesthesia, surgery. But let's not forget nurses and ancillary staff like pharmacists and respiratory therapists.
Very cool.
Then we started to go even bigger. And you can't really talk about hemodynamics without especially neonatal hemodynamics, without talking about long-term neurodevelopmental implications. So let's break down those silos as well. And that's where the Newborn Brain Society comes. So much of what we talk about in hemodynamics of the extremely preterm revolves around necrotizing enterocolitis and the implications of poor perfusion to the gut. In the CVICU world, so much of their conversations are around single ventricle physiology, post-op feeding algorithms, and NEC in those patients. So there's just no way of getting around how much these are integrated with one another. So we called the NEC Society, and they said, we would love to be a part of this. I think this goes for all of neonatology, that no longer can we think of fetal and neonatal as two separate entities. I think whether you like it or not, the two are absolutely completely aligned. Decisions you make in the fetal world will have direct ramifications in the neonatal world. There's an absolute continuum of care there. So bringing the fetal world in was absolutely critical, eliminating that silo. And then, of course,
it's a continuum.
It's an absolute continuum. And then the PDA was just a natural fit. We've been talking about this for 4 or 5 years now. Chalk this up to one of the benefits of COVID, I guess. It just made it so that all of these societies, all of these groups came together for one big, large, epic meeting.
I guess
let me put a plug in, if you don't mind. Can I put a quick plug in?
Yeah.
I think Rooney, you opened people's eyes more than anybody else to the notion of heart disease and necrotizing enterocolitis and single ventricle physiology. We've highlighted your paper. I think it was 2015. It's been a while now, but that paper has been highlighted and quoted dozens of times.
Yeah, that's true. And the funny story behind that, and I have to kind of give credit to the group that I worked at the time at UAB and Children's, was that we in fact had a discussion in our division meeting whether or not to feed babies with single ventricle. The paradigm then was not to feed, right? And I'd come back from Boston not too long ago, and we didn't feed single ventricle physiology patients. But I was challenged. And then I said, I used that kind of box of how am I going to respond to a challenge like that? And I said, okay, maybe I'm wrong. So it was a group effort at Children's at the time with Dr. Bernstein and Dr. Alton and Ashley Mullinger. And we decided, okay, let's do a study so that we can prove that it's feasible to actually do at least our trophic feeds. And so again, a simple discussion, something simple then ultimately led to changing the preoperative management of hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which was fun.
Very cool.
Rooney, can you tell us in your words, since we have the pleasure of having you on as well, a little bit about what you think the appeal would be for a neonatologist, for example, who's being pulled? I mean, let's give our people some credit. We're being pulled in all sorts of directions, and so you do have to make some commitments. And maybe this year you can go to a few conferences, and next year you'll be able to go to another. But why do you think it would be compelling and relevant for a neonatologist to attend Neoheart?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that the benefits are on so many different levels, and I kind of asked myself that too before this conference or this discussion. It was how does either additional training in hemodynamics or cardiac ICU for a neonatologist, how does that benefit your clinical bedside kind of management? And there's no doubt that your mindset and your focus and how you think of hemodynamics, how you think of blood pressure, how you think of all the parameters that you're watching kind of changes, and things can be crystallized out in how you actually ultimately clinically manage and perceive the patient in the NICU. And I do think Neoheart gives a perfect kind of, again, a blend of all the different areas that do matter when it comes to invasive and non-invasive monitoring, a little bit of the experience from the CVICU, even from the operating room, and how certain aspects can be beneficial when it comes to even outcomes of post-op patients, and how we can maybe even bring that into the NICU. And like Amir said, when it comes to intestinal perfusion, when it comes to brain perfusion, when it comes to brain protection, and the correct use of inotropes. So many times, which I tell you guys often, people just ask you what inotrope should I use, and then that's step away from that kind of question and really focus on the clinical assessment and tie in everything that you can learn at Neoheart, also including assessment of the ductus, the recent evidence, and really, and that's where having kind of torn down all these silos can benefit the participants of such a conference, where you can kind of really just cast a broad net. And like Amir said, I mean, it's incredible what's actually here, the lifelong implications of what you actually do in the fetal life, perinatal period. And now, one of the talks is even looking at long-term myocardial dysfunction in form of preemies. So again, tying all these things together really broadens your perspective of what you do every single day in the NICU.
Yeah, I was actually hoping maybe I could talk about some of the titles of some of the talks, because I mean, they're totally relevant, I think. And this is just a handful of, I think there must be, I don't know, close to 100 different sessions, more than that, over the course of the few days. But just off the top of the list, reperfusion injury and cardiogenic shock, which we see in the NICU, hemodynamics and therapeutic hypothermia, preterm infants with congenital heart disease, targeted neonatal echo, neonatal pulmonary hypertension, the neonatal management with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. There's a whole session on congenital diaphragmatic hernia, obviously tons of lectures on the PDA, looking at it from every single angle, in addition to the PDA symposium. Something close to my heart, the ICU environment impacting neurodevelopment, decision-making during pregnancy, decision-making about taking the neonate to the cath lab, neck and congenital heart disease, picking the right sedation, and a whole session on hot topics in neonatal care. And I mean, that's not even all the lectures that I think are neonatal, everything's neonatal relevant. That's why it's called Neoheart. So it's a really cool lineup. And the faculty lineup is so diverse, comes from all over the country, which I think is something that is often hard for conferences to do. So I think this is really, really neat.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes I think to the credit of other conferences as well, you can get the right mix of people. But in this specific case, I mean, neonatal cardiology involves so many different specialties that to be able to have a dedicated space in time to actually have these discussions, and the lineup, as you said, Mark Weems, Patrick McNamara, among others. It's not like these are leaders of our field. So it's kind of nice to have them all in one place at one time to have constructive discussions about the PDA, hemodynamics, and all
that. Thank you for commenting on that. Thanks for the kind words, Daphna. We put a lot of attention on the speakers. I think we have, to your point, 134 speakers. So it's big. It is, to your point, the who's who in their fields. Nobody here is, they're all 5-star recruits, basically. These are the who's who. We spent a lot of time as the planning committee talking about diversity in this. We wanted to make sure that there's near 50-50 representation of neos and cardio, people live in the cardiac world. We wanted 50-50 male to female distribution. We tried to get as many international people as we can. And in order to make that happen, we also had to build in a hybrid component. So there will be a hybrid component to this. So some of the speakers will be live, the international speakers. Some will be live, some will be in person. Some will be live in their home country. We have Australia, we have Asia, we've got Europe,
Cool.
Middle East. So we've got speakers from, to your point, all over.
And I was sorry, Ben, when you talk about breaking down silos, I mean, that's really what's happening, right? We have the leaders in our quote unquote, neonatologists that we're following, and we see them on Twitter, and we see them in the conferences, but there are leaders in each of these disciplines, right? And to have them all together and to have them a lot of the sessions are really not a lecture, they're a discourse. And so to be able to see different perspectives on the same topic, I think is really, it's revolutionary. I love it. I think it's really cool.
You're too nice. You exactly nailed it, Daphna. I think you and me were probably BFFs in another life, because
That's right.
Everything you're saying is exactly what's going through our minds, for the longest time. In our plenary sessions, I think nowadays, because everybody's got access to, your Twitter and your iPhone, we all have the latest and greatest publication that's come out. There's no information out there that none of us have access to immediately or have already heard or read about it. And so what becomes a much more interesting conversation is the gray zone, where there isn't papers. So what do I do in that difficult scenario? What do the greats do in that difficult scenario? For example, should I do nitric oxide or should I not do nitric oxide and diaphragmatic hernia with pulmonary hypertension? The literature is conflicting. I don't know what to do. I know there's a right time and a wrong time. What does the Steve Abmans of the world do, and how do they decide? Or the Kinsellas, how do they decide? The Robin Steinhorns, the who's who of pulmonary hypertension, how do they decide? And so what we tried to do was sort of take a page out of TED Talks. Nobody wants to hear a 1-hour talk. We believe you about your Drosophila work back in the day. We don't need to hear about, let's just get straight to the point. You have 15 minutes to make your point, because if you can't make it in 15 minutes, nobody's interested. So they're quick, short talks with about a longer amount of time dedicated towards conversation, with an equal distribution of neonatologists, cardiologists, cardiac intensive care, and bedside providers, and just keeping it very high level conversation.
That's huge. I wanted to actually highlight that point next, because I'm a very curious person, but to be honest, I don't know if I would be able to sit through an hour and a half discussion on a topic that I'm not so familiar with. But I think what you described, making the talks like 20 to 30 minutes tops, makes this much more palatable. 15 minutes. So then it's exactly right. I'm perfectly fine listening. I listen to adult medicine stuff. So I have some form of attention span, but I think this is critical.
Yeah.
And
so many intensivists with ADD, we got to
absolutely all of us.
We got to keep it short.
I wanted to ask you guys maybe. So first of all, let me get some logistical stuff out of the way, Amir. People were able to submit abstracts for this conference. I think that has closed or not yet?
We were initially going to have, so thank you. We're initially going to have a close date of tomorrow, July 1st, but I think we're going to extend it to July 15th, because so many abstracts have come in the last couple of days, which you would expect at the deadline. So we're going to extend it till July 15th.
Okay, so if you're listening to this episode, I'm not sure. We're recording, not live, so I'm not sure when I'm going to release this episode. But whatever time you have left, you'll have time. You'll have at least.
And if you're part of this podcast, we'll let it. We'll make an exception to listeners of this podcast.
Be careful with which format.
They can put it on their abstract.
We have a large community, Amir. You have to be careful.
We'll stick with it. I'll stick with it for this podcast. I'll stick with it.
And then in terms of registration, my understanding doesn't close until the day of the conference. So technically people can register all the way through until the beginning of August.
People can register all the way through the beginning of August. And we are going to release the virtual component of it probably the first or second week of July. And don't quote me on this. I'm just playing with this idea in my head. We haven't solidified it yet. Maybe we record it and actually can sell the recording afterwards as well for people who couldn't make it because they're on summer vacation on some exotic island and they're really interested but couldn't make it. These are just ideas we're toying around with.
Fair enough. And that's also an important point, because that means that, so there's an in-person component in Disneyland, in California, not the one in Florida. And,
That's fair.
And what did I want to say? And there's a hybrid component. So technically people will be able also to sign up for a virtual component for attending the conference. So that's really important. Rooney, Amir, what are the talks you're most looking forward to?
Go for it, Rooney.
Oh gosh, from
the ones you're moderating.
No, actually, I'm not on the panel, but that's actually a good thing. I will say the combination. So I love diastolic dysfunction. And so I love any talk on diastolic dysfunction. And so the RV diastolic dysfunction assessment of the RV function, cardiopulmonary interactions, those are the ones that I love. But I will say, as the diaphragmatic hernia hemodynamics is also very intriguing. But I do look forward to listening once again. And this time I'm going to take notes. I was part of the BPD conference last time that I heard it, the long-term myocardial dysfunction of former preemies. I look forward to that talk.
Amir.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There's a talk that I heard once before, so I can't say I'm looking forward to it, but I just want to give you guys a plug. Kara Goss is an adult intensivist out of Dallas Children's, who's made her career on long-term myocardial implications of preterm births. And you kind of hear it and you go, okay, that's interesting. It's mind-blowing. It is the most, this is one of the greatest talks, one of the top 3 greatest talks I've ever heard in my life. It is absolutely spectacular. And usually when you hear a talk, there's rare that you really learn something new. It's sort of an extension of something you already knew, or sort of refined what you already know. This is one of those few talks that I can really say the whole thing was mind-blowing for me. The whole thing was new. The whole thing was innovative. The whole thing was interesting. I was literally blown away by that talk. So I'm excited to hear that again. The session that I'm most excited about, too, the biggest mistake I ever made and what I learned from it. Again, we've got the who's who. It's actually funny. We invited a lot of people, but you could just kind of imagine some people's egos were too big to give this talk. And so some people said no, but there was a bunch of people that were like, oh yeah, sign me up. Gil Wernovsky. I mean, one of the best speakers I've ever heard was like, sign me up. So that's a session I'm really excited about. But the other one that I'm excited about is the scientific urine review. These are the longest talks at 20 minutes. I figured if we can do a urine review, it's unfair to do it at 15 minutes. So we just give them 5 additional minutes for 20 minutes. So Gabriel Altit from McGill, trained in both neonatology and cardiology, doing neonatal hemodynamics urine review. You got neonatal pulmonary hypertension urine review. You got Patrick McNamara talking about TNE urine review. We got neonatal cardiac intensive care urine review. So just looking at all the big publications and what does it mean for us at the bedside as clinicians? What should we take back with us that we maybe missed over the last year?
I mean, I obviously have less of an insight as you guys, but there's one talk by Gil Wernovsky that's called "Good Judgment Comes from Experience. Experience Comes from Bad Judgment." I'm curious to see what she's gonna say.
So hands down, one of the best speakers is Gil Wernovsky.
Oh yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, hands down.
Good choice. Good choice.
So Amir, the neonatal community may not be quite as familiar with Jill as the CVICU and cardiology. Give us the brief summary of kind of his past.
Gil, I think, was the first ever, or one of the first CVICU fellows out of Boston Children's. Then went to CHOP and spent his career there. Now he's a nationwide. He is a huge advocate for neonatologists in the NICU. In fact, he is also leading the World Congress of Cardiology and Cardiothoracic Surgery meeting next year, which is sort of an Olympic style, once every 4-year meeting. And he absolutely demanded that we need a Neoheart at the World Congress. Cardiologists need to learn from neonatologists. You guys have a lot of valuable insight. So he was actually, I had mentioned earlier that diaphragmatic hernia is more like Schoen's complex than it is like, anything else, like a 24-weeker that we deal with. And that was actually him. We were at one of the Neohearts and I said, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think we should do better? And he's like, you need a session on comparative physiology. Of course, this is a few years ago. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, we have so much more in common than we do different. And he brought this up. He's like, diaphragmatic hernia and Schoen's complex is the same thing. we need to learn from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you're talking to somebody who's as renowned as Gil, you just kind of nod your head and go, oh yeah. But I had no idea what he was talking about. Like, what? About how in what? Huh? And the more and more I started thinking, I was like, oh my God, he's absolutely right. They actually are the exact same physiology once you kind of get over the, the mental block that you have on it. So Gil he's outside the box. He's dynamic. He's hilarious. He's loved by all. He's pro Neo. He's just an all around great dude.
That's awesome.
And very focused on neurodevelopment.
Big focus on neurodevelopment.
Also,
yes, I'm familiar
CBICU.
with the name.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So for the people listening, if you are interested in the Neoheart conference, as you probably should, just go register. We will have a series of special episodes every day of the conference to showcase some of the speakers, a little bit of what they discussed, to give you a glimpse in case you need more to decide whether you're going to attend in 2023 or not. We have no financial ties or any other conflict of interest to disclose between the incubator and Amir and Neoheart. But it is. I encourage everybody listening to go check out the program. It is phenomenal. I am very sad to say that there are some pretty nifty workshops as well, but they're so nifty that most of them are sold out. So like there was a point of care ultrasound workshop. There's an echo for the ICU physician workshop. All those have sold out already. There's another workshop called artificial intelligence in the ICU. There's like a lot of stuff. So check out the program, and we'll be back with Amir and with Rooney at the beginning of August to present to you some of these amazing speakers that are talking at this conference. And we're very honored as the incubator to be able to bring to your attention, the audience, the different conferences out there and some of the content that they're presenting. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Rooney, for being on with us today.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you,
Ben.
Daphna.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Daphna.
Rooney. This was a pleasure.
Daphna, this was a pleasure as well. Daphna, I'll see you later this week.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.